Hello everyone, Lewis from Scrubwood Studios here with a bit of a different custom model video. This is, I'm unscripted here if you can't tell. It's a bit different in a couple of ways. One, we're starting off with some footage I took because I was going to use this for filming and then wasn't. There's a community post on the channel which explains that. But it's also, the model itself is quite different and I'm just taking this chance here to explain that. Basically, I used some different materials and techniques. This model started out as just an experiment, like I was just going to do the head and just see how the new materials and techniques worked. And I ended up doing the whole thing. So, what I did here was instead of like using, I barely used any wire for this. I started out using some wire, but then I ended up trying a method I saw on Marco Make's channel, which is basically just make your skeleton and your armature out of masking tape, and masking tape alone, like don't bother with any wire at all, just literally use masking tape. And I found it was a bit easier to work with, and it didn't sacrifice the strength as much as I thought, so I might do that more in future. However, there was one problem with it, which I'll get to in a sec. I also was using, like, speaking of Marco Makes, I was using a material I saw him use instead of my usual polymer clay. I was using this stuff called Milliput. It's a sort of, it's a bit like quick steel, but for model makers. It's like, it's an epoxy, like you mix two chemicals together, there's a reaction, and then it sets. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making up the skeleton, and then I tried to put some clay on the, or some milliput rather, on the head. But what I found is when I use water, because you can use water to smooth out milliput, when I did that, the masking tape head started, like the glue started to dissolve and it started to come apart. So then I just decided to stuff it. I'm just going to make a head completely out of, like a skull, completely out of milliput with some eyes. And then I originally made some teeth out of milliput, but I didn't really like how they were looking, so I came up with a new idea. I cut out some teeth out of card and then painted them ahead of time, varnished them, and then glued them on, and then built the milliput of the face, like the skin layer, around them. You might be wondering what I did after, with the rest of my masking tape skeleton after the head dissolved in the water. Well, I came up with what was actually quite a good solution. Basically, I just got some varnish that I had lying around, like old gloss varnish, and I just soaked the masking tape in that. And what I found was when I put the milliput over that and used water on it, it didn't dissolve because it was varnished. So there you go, that's what I probably should have done for the head in the first place. Another thing I did differently with this model is, instead of starting with the sort of main body and working my way out, I sort of started with the sort of extremities, like the head, the ends of the limbs, the end of the tail, and sort of worked my way inwards. I also did not use any texture stamps for this model. I was looking at some of my old models and I was worrying they were a bit over textured at such a small scale. So I decided, you know what? And also stamping with, what happens after a while if you stamp enough times, the clay, or in this case it would have been milliput, gets stuck in the holes on the stamps and you have to clean them out. So this time I'm like, okay, this is an experiment. Let's try just scratching just random patterns into the milliput with a toothpick. And it actually didn't look that bad, especially from a distance, so I might do that more often, but I don't know, what do you guys think? And here it is. So I'm fairly happy with this thing, actually. Happy enough that it was going to appear in Prehistoric Valley before I found out, as those of you who have seen the community post will know, that I didn't put quite enough varnish on it and some of the paint came off. It's okay, I've put more varnish on it since then. I'm going to keep this bit fairly brief, but we'll just have a quick look over it. My main sort of complaint is, considering that most reconstructions of Siats as a neovenaturid, which is what I've tried to reconstruct it as here, are fairly gracile. This thing's pretty bulky, especially around the sort of the chest and the neck kind of region. See it from the top, you can kind of see it a bit more. And it does, but it can stand up, although admittedly in a tripod pose. If you look at it from the front, you can see it's a little bit like somehow the torso and the legs kind of got out of line, but I kind of like that. It gives it kind of slightly interesting pose, almost like it's, I guess, lunging at something to attack it. The teeth I'm pretty happy with. They are bits of card painted and varnished and then glued into place and then covered over with Milliput, but there you go. Claws look pretty nice. I did give it an enlarged claw on its first finger, partially as a little reference to the fact that Siats might not be a neovenaturid, it might be a Megaraptoran, or it could be something else entirely. I mean, the remains are terrible, but I think it's a very interesting animal because, like, no matter how you look at it, it's either, like, if it's a neovenaturid, it's one of the last surviving, like, Carcharodontosaurs in North America. If it's a Megaraptoran, then it's the only North American Megaraptoran that I can think of. If it's some sort of Tyrannosauroid, then it's one of the first truly big Tyrannosaurs, like Tyrannosauroids, because, at least in North America, because, like, what else is there? Like, Moros? Yeah. So, no matter how you reconstruct it, it's quite an interesting animal, in my opinion, but, there's a bit of Milliput there on the tail, but, you know. So yeah, that's it. I'm pretty happy with this thing. I do like the paint job I gave it. I'm very happy with that. Maybe the sort of turquoisey colour could have been dry brushed on a bit better, but I think the grey works really well. The red crests work nicely. The underside does look a bit messy and a bit blotchy, but overall, I'm fairly happy with this thing. Doing some size comparisons real quick. Here it is with the animal that replaced it in PV as Siats, which is the Collector Deluxe Neovenator. As you can see, the Neovenator is definitely a bit taller, and it's actually not quite as long, but it's definitely taller, but it is a bit skinnier. We've also got probably the closest thing to a Siats in official figures, which is the Vitae Chilantisaurus. I'm not counting like the Mattel figure or whatever, because I'm talking like realistic stuff here. As you can see, the Vitae Chilantisaurus is very undersized for such a large theropod. It should be at least as big as my custom. And just a couple more size comparisons. I'm going to bring in the Safari Allosaurus, which, as we can see, is actually a pretty similar size to the Siats, but it's a bit shorter. It's not quite as long. Although saying that, if its head was turned that way, it probably would be about the same size. So yeah, they are actually probably about the same size. We've also got my old representation of Siats. Sorry about that, someone had an alarm going off in the other room. Anyway, I'm going to put you at the back real quick and you're going to fall over because you suck. And we're going to do one final size comparison, which will be the Collector 1:40 scale human. So with that, I'm going to end this video. Please like, subscribe, all those other things I'm supposed to tell you to do as a YouTuber. Let me know what you like about this thing and what I could do to improve on future models. Goodbye.